Welcome to VERITAS. Don't forget to hit subscribe and the notification bell so you never miss our latest episodes. Please like this video, comment below with your thoughts, and share it with others seeking truth. For more exclusive content and to support our mission, visit VERITAS7.com.
The questions you always had. The answers you were never given. The place to seek the truth. Welcome to VERITAS.
Tonight on VERITAS, our special guest is Steve Goreham. He's an engineer, author, and researcher who has spent years challenging the dominant narrative on energy, climate, and environmental policy. His new book, Green Breakdown: The Coming Renewable Energy Failure, argues that the world's rush toward wind, solar, and net zero policies is not only unsustainable, but potentially catastrophic for human prosperity. For decades, Goreham has studied the intersection of science, politics, and economics. He believes that climate fear, what he calls climatism, has pushed governments, corporations, and citizens into costly energy decisions that don't align with reality. In this interview, we'll explore whether rising temperatures truly threaten civilization, whether carbon dioxide is a pollutant or a gift, and whether hurricanes, wildfires, and droughts are really getting worse, or whether we've been misled. We'll also examine why so many proposed solutions, from banning gas stoves to outlawing coal plants to forcing electric cars, may cause more harm than good. From the push to eliminate meat and dairy in world cities, to the trillion-dollar subsidies behind renewable power, to the looming consequences for industry, agriculture, and the everyday person, Steve Goreham pulls no punches. He believes the seeds of failure are already here, and that unless society shifts course, the green dream may end in economic and human disaster. Tonight, we'll test those claims, challenge the assumptions, and seek the truth about energy, climate, and our future. Steve Goreham is coming up next. Welcome to VERITAS. If this is your first time listening, welcome home. To access tonight's full interview and all of our exclusive material, simply join the VERITAS Plus family by clicking on the subscribe button at VERITAS7.com. While you're there, don't forget to visit the VERITAS store, featuring a range of great products, including Focus Life Force Energy. Experience the benefits with a 15-day free trial of FLFE, no credit card required. Also, be sure to explore our enhanced VERITAS Plus transcripts, offering full transcripts, comprehensive analysis, and exclusive insights for every episode. As a VERITAS Plus member, you'll receive a 50% discount on these enhanced transcripts. Want to get in touch? Be a guest on the program? Suggest someone or share feedback? Just click the contact button at VERITAS7.com. So sit back, relax, and enjoy tonight's program. His latest book is The Green Breakdown: The Coming Renewable Energy Failure. And directly near Chicago, Illinois, I'd like to welcome Steve Goreham. Hello, Steve, and welcome to VERITAS.
Hi, Mel. It's great to join you today.
My pleasure. And Steve, this is. I've been trying to get a hold of somebody who's an expert in this field. I remember many years ago, I interviewed Rosa Koire. Do you remember her?
Sorry, but I do not.
She wrote the book, The Green Mask. It's very similar to what we're experiencing today. But, we live in an age where simply questioning climate dogma can cost you your career, your reputation, even your friends. Yes. Science is supposed to be inevitable. You have to invite it for debate. Yet we see punishment instead of discussion. And you've described this as climatism, a great word that you coined. If science is about doubt and discovery, Steve, how did climate fear evolve into a belief system defended at all costs?
Well, it is powerful. Climatism is the fear that humans are causing dangerous global warming. And it was the title of my first of 4 books, Climatism. And in that book, I talk about the attacks on scientists. There were many, many scientists that came out against windmills and came out against the theory of man-made warming, and they were blackballed. They were forced to resign. They never get on TV shows like BBC again, that sort of thing. So it takes a lot of courage to to point out that climate is probably due to natural causes, not man-made emissions.
But to me, it's almost like a fear-driven ideology that demands obedience. If you don't put up with this, if you don't obey, then you could be expelled, you can be exiled, you can even go to jail in certain places.
Well, that's absolutely right. It is driven by fear, and you hear it every day about rising oceans, about stronger storms, about all sorts of different things. And, if you're in college and you're in the sciences and you're looking at two paths, one is to adopt the theory of man-made warming, and you get all kinds of possibilities for promotion and for grants and other things, or you could take the path of saying that fears about climate change are not justified. And boy, if you do that, then you may not get tenure, and there's a lot of issues. So it's very, very tough. Most of the climate skeptics are older scientists, or they're guys at universities who have already gotten their tenure. But still, it takes a lot of courage to go against the prevailing public belief.
And we're told today that warming is unprecedented. But then I see that Mars is hotter than it's ever been, and Mars is farther away from the sun than the Earth. So the historical record, and thank you for sending me a presentation. You mentioned the medieval warm period, where agriculture flourished and civilizations expanded. Have people died more in cold weather or warm weather historically, Steve?
Well, that's the thing. We have many people that say warm temperatures are dangerous. But if you look at the data, and often I'll ask audiences when I present to the group, which is more dangerous, cold weather or warm weather? And they usually get it right. Cold weather is more dangerous. Our flu seasons in the Northern Hemisphere are from about June to September. And in the Southern Hemisphere, they're during their cold months. I'm sorry, excuse me, I got that wrong. The Southern Hemisphere are from about June to September. Those are their cold months. Our flu season is from about October to March, our cold months. More people get sick during cold months, and more people die. A guy by the name of Falagas did a study in 2009, and he looked at 10 different nations and found that this was in the Northern and Southern Hemisphere, in every nation, more people died during the cold months than the warm months. And a lot of people have pointed out that if it warms a little bit, we'll have fewer deaths. And the other question is, where do people retire in the United States when they get older? They all move to Idaho and Saskatchewan and Alaska, right?
Right, exactly. I mean, look, Arizona, Florida, the hotter places, Mexico.
Right.
So if that's the case, why do they continue pushing this, and do people not get it?
Well, we're in the midst of what I think is the biggest misconception in history, if you will. Today, climatism, the theory of man-made global warming, is accepted by more than 180 heads of states, the United Nations, most major scientific organizations, most of the Fortune 500 companies, most of our leading universities. Last year, the world spent about $2 billion on renewables, all with a drive to try and control global temperatures. But there's really no evidence that can be done. But that's what Green Breakdown is about. This is going to fall apart over the next few decades. We're seeing some early signs now. And people are going to get back to sensible energy policy and the real important stuff. And the important things are to eliminate real pollution, not carbon dioxide, reduce plastic in the oceans, reduce the dumping of wastewater into rivers, lakes, and streams, which occurs around the world, not much in the United States and Europe. Those are proper environmental policies.
So if we have to get to net zero here in the United States, and we are, how much is the United States responsible for, quote unquote, global warming when you compare it to, say, India or China?
Well, it's pretty small, actually. If you believe in the theory of man-made warming, United States emissions are about 13% of the emissions worldwide, and they're falling. China is doing about twice as much as the U.S. India will soon pass us. Now, the proponents of the theory of man-made warming and those at the United Nations will say Well, we have all this history, though. The United States has emitted more throughout history. But the bottom line is that emissions aren't really what's causing things. And let me give you a few examples. So the United Nations has said that we're in the era of global boiling, and they claim that temperatures are the hottest in history. But when you look back, you find, by the way, we have had a little bit of warming, about 1.2 degrees Celsius since 1880, since we first started using the first thermometers. 140 years, 1.2 degrees Celsius. That is typically what changes every day between 9 and 10 in the morning. But if you look back in history, you'll find there were many periods in the last 10,000 years when it was warmer than today. And there's a lot of evidence for that. Ice cores from Greenland, for example, show that we've had many, many warm periods occurring every 1,000 or 1,500 years. And these were multi-centuries long in duration. And for most of the last 10,000 years, it's been warmer on the planet than it is today. And that, of course, those are periods when we were not emitting much carbon dioxide, no power plants, and no sport utility vehicles.
There you have it. Ice core samples, tree rings, tells us where we were hundreds, if not thousands of years ago. So if we were warmer 100 or 1,000 years before we reached the industrial age, then what is it that they want?
Well, they sort of ignore history. And there are many, many examples. Let me give you some. There's a glacier in central Switzerland called the Rhone Glacier. And it's a mountainside glacier. It's the source of the Rhone River, which flows out of the Rhone Glacier into France and then down into the Mediterranean. But this glacier has been receding for about 100 years. But every time it pulls back, they find things under it like wagon wheels. And they find horse bridles. And they find 4,000-year-old wood. And many scientists have pointed out for most of the last 10,000 years, the valley where the Rhone Glacier sits today has been ice-free. Just a piece of evidence, one of many, that shows us that it has been warmer naturally in the past than it is today.
I remember in 2014, I think it was, a viral video came out before he died, John Coleman, the co-founder of the Weather Channel, and he said he denied the reality of human-caused climate change during his later years. I wonder why not before, but he called global warming a hoax and a scam. And I remember how they almost wanted to shut him down. Same thing with the BBC. I remember years ago watching the meteorologists saying, "Oh, we have warm weather today. It's beautiful." The next year, the weather was cooler, but it's all red, almost like looking like hell and fire. Who is behind this? Is it the United Nations? Who is it, and for what purpose, Steve?
Well, let me answer that for a moment, but I just want to pitch John Coleman. He was a great guy. He actually was gracious enough to write the foreword for my first book, Climate.
Oh, wow.
But I attribute this to kind of a misconception in a lot of ways. Back in the 1970s and 1980s, a bunch of computer modelers said they saw that carbon dioxide was rising, and they knew carbon dioxide was a greenhouse gas. And they said that the planet is warming and humans are causing it. 1988, we had a Senate hearing put together by several senators. Dr. James Hansen of NASA came and testified. Mr. Hansen was a computer modeler running climate models, and he said he was 99% sure that the Earth was warming and humans were causing it. That very same year, the United Nations, who wanted to be an environmental leader, formed the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. And within 1 year, by 1990, that panel found that humans were causing dangerous climate change. And then just 2 years later, at the Rio de Janeiro Earth Summit, more than 40 nations and the European Union signed a treaty saying they would try to reduce greenhouse gases. Now, as soon as that was done, many scientists said, well, we just don't know enough to make this sort of a conclusion. But the world sort of adopted this, and for the last 30 years, they've been arguing about how much and when to reduce greenhouse gases. But we find that the Earth is rising, the temperatures are rising a little bit, but well below computer model projections. But now we have all these industries that are behind this. We have wind and solar and biofuels. We have deans of sustainability at universities. We have vice presidents of sustainability corporations. We have thousands of consultants. We have nations that have been pitching this, the UK and Germany, who wanted to be environmental leaders. And so this has a tremendous amount of momentum. And as I mentioned, 2 billion.
Want the full story? This is just part one. Now offering video interviews and discounted transcripts for members. Become a VERITAS Plus member today at veritas7.com.
$1 billion a year being spent. But if you look at the actual data, it's very hard to distinguish human-caused warming from natural climate change, which is occurring all the time.
Is Al Gore, is he still pushing the agenda? I remember 2006 when I watched An Inconvenient Truth. Oh my God, we're all going to die, blah, 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 and it's going to be in a couple of years, and a couple of years, and a couple of years, and nothing happens. Is he still pushing this agenda?
Well, I think he is. And Mr. Gore, I've read all of his books, and he's had a worldwide bestseller, Inconvenient Truth in 2006. But he predicted in 2008 that the North Pole would be ice-free in the summers by 2014. That didn't happen. That's just one of the issues. You know, I think Mr. Gore is sincere. I know he's been an environmentalist since the 1970s, but the evidence just does not support his assertion that humans are driving global warming or climate.
Why is it that instead of spending so many billions or trillions of dollars, which is what they want, a $50 trillion tax on the world in order to reduce temperature of probably 1 or 2 degrees, right?
Yep.
As you said, plastics, cleaning the oceans of plastic, recycling plastic effectively, because right now it's not being done properly. And I even found an individual who's using plastic and turning it into combustible fuel. Apparently he's being threatened. So that and many other things that we could do to really save the environment and flourish, not this.
Yeah, we could. And as a matter of fact, things are getting better. You don't hear it much in the headlines, but for example, data from the EPA shows that the EPA primary criteria pollutants that were defined in the Clean Air Act in the 1970s, sulfur dioxide, nitrous oxide, ozone, particulates, lead, those are not down now a combined 80% from what they were in 1980, and probably much more from the earlier days. I can remember when I was young, we were driving by the steel mills near Chicago, near Gary, Indiana, and literally something out of the air just coated the window of our car. we had to stop on the side and clean our windows off to be able to drive. But there are many, many examples of things like the river burning in Cleveland, of many poor pollution issues in the past. But now we are doing much, much better. And this is happening around the world. Mexico City, the United Nations declared, I think it was 1994, they were the most polluted city in the world. They have these mountains around that traps pollution, but their air is very much cleaner today. So in the course of a development of a nation, they clean up their air and water as they get wealthier, and that's really a good news story.
And by the way, I'm not going to deny that this is actually good sometimes. I actually worked in Mexico City 93 and 94 during the implementation of NAFTA. And I remember leaving the office for a couple of hours, coming back, taking my jacket off and seeing yellow all over my shirt. That's how polluted it was. You couldn't use your car once a week. I think those initiatives are positive, and you go to Mexico City now and you can finally breathe. So I'm not against any of this. What I'm against is seeing China and the way they pollute, and India. Look at the Ganges River. And when the world is telling us that we are the guilty party when we're not.
Well, that's true. And if you look through the supply chain, one example is electric vehicles, for example. And by the way, this whole climatism thing is focused on carbon dioxide as being a pollutant. And we can talk a little bit later about Lee Zeldin of the EPA, who's now trying to roll back the endangerment finding in 2009, which labeled carbon dioxide a pollutant. But the world is focused on getting rid of carbon dioxide, but there are other issues. And people say electric vehicles are very environmentally friendly, but they don't know about the supply chain for EVs and to produce those batteries. According to the International Energy Agency, they point out that an electric vehicle has 7 times the special metals of an internal combustion engine car. And these are copper and cobalt and lithium and nickel and a number of others. And these come from, first, they're mined in places where the policies are not good. For example, cobalt, the biggest producer of cobalt is the Democratic Republic of Congo in Africa. And it's well known that they're using child labor and forced labor to get the cobalt ore out of the hills. And then most of that ore is shipped to China, which is the biggest producer of special metals in the world and rare earths. And in China, there are big polluted areas as well. There's a place called Rare Earth Lake. I haven't been there, but as far as you can see in the pictures, the land has been polluted by the waste and the metal tailings from producing special metals. And then those metals go into batteries and are shipped to the United States, and everybody says, wow, isn't my EV environmentally friendly? But they don't look at what's going on overseas.
How many pounds or kilograms is it needed to have one single battery for an EV?
Yeah, well, I'm forgetting the name of the guy I should remember, has pointed out that for a single 1,000-pound battery, which is about what you need in a EV to get any range nowadays, you have to move 500,000 pounds of earth in a mine to produce those metals. So it's a very, very big issue. And so what we're doing in trying to go to the energy transition, we're moving away from hydrocarbons, coal, oil, and gas, which mostly produce carbon dioxide. And then you end up with other environmental problems, all this mining that has to be done. But the public often doesn't realize that situation.
Here's an excerpt from an article that I wrote a couple of years ago about this when they were really pushing EVs. Thank God I don't know if it's dying, but at least it's mitigating somewhat. But, quote, furthermore, let's see, production of just one EV battery requires 25 pounds of lithium, 60 pounds of nickel, 44 pounds of manganese, 30 pounds of cobalt, 200 pounds of copper, and 400 pounds of aluminum, steel, and plastic. Processing this stuff requires the mining of entire mountains, thousands of square miles of land, and billions of gallons of oil and fuel. Your take on this?
Well, again, I'm not necessarily against EVs. People don't realize every source has environmental impact, and EVs have a very big one. Again, the problem is that we have all the governments of the world, or many of them, trying to force people to switch to electric vehicles on the idea that they can stop the oceans from rising if we all drive electric cars. And that's a bunch of nonsense. That is modern superstition. EVs are going to get better and better. And hopefully we will have improved mining wherever it's being done and reducing pollution. But people shouldn't be forced to buy an EV, forced to get rid of their gasoline or diesel vehicle on the strange idea that we can make the storms less severe. That just isn't going to happen.
I don't have a problem with EV either. What I have a problem with is people who connect their EV to their car and say, look, I'm saving the planet. And I ask them, where do you think that cable goes to? It goes to another place that's probably burning, quote unquote, fossil fuels. But what about hydrogen cells? What about, motors that run with water that we've had that in? I mean, you probably knew Stanley, forget his name, but there are many other ways to have a battery or charge an electric vehicle without what we're doing now.
Well, there are, but the problem is a lot of those are very expensive. So that's another issue. The world's pushing for hydrogen, but it's really not going to happen. We can get into that if you like.
Is that more expensive than maybe buying an electric vehicle that you have to replace the battery? I believe what is it, 10 years? You have to replace pretty much the value of the car in a battery?
Yeah. Well, in the United States, the only place we have any real hydrogen vehicles for consumers is California. I think there's one hydrogen station in Hawaii as well. But the number of hydrogen stations in California has been declining. People are just having trouble with them. They don't have fuel. And hydrogen is very hard. First, to make green hydrogen requires huge amounts of electricity. You have to use electrolysis of water typically. You run electricity through water and you split the oxygen and hydrogen atoms, capture the hydrogen. That's very electricity intensive. And it costs about 5 times as much as hydrogen made on site with that they do in industry. And they make that from natural gas typically. And then hydrogen is very, very hard to transport and store. You either have to cool hydrogen to about minus 253 degrees Celsius, pretty close to absolute zero, or you have to pressurize it to about 10,000 pounds per square inch. That's about 300 atmospheres. That's 300 times the pressure in your car tire. And then once you pressurize it, if you try and put it at a hydrogen filling station, the energy value the density is so small that even hydrogen at 300 atmospheres requires 7 times the volume to store to get the same energy as gasoline. So you can imagine these monster tanks underground to store hydrogen. It's just not, and you can't put it through pipelines. It's just very, very expensive. So we may get to hydrogen at some point in time, but we're a long, long way from that in reality.
Are we a long, long way from it because of the demand or the supply? Because obviously, if we can manufacture more and get the prices down, there will be enough demand to satisfy the balance.
Well, we could. Again, today it's 5 times the price, and that's without shipping. Then you got to figure out how to ship it. Very expensive to ship. Can't put it through pipelines. We don't have tankers that can do it. So unless you're right next to a hydrogen production site with your factory or whatever, it's going to be very difficult to get it. We'd have to build new pipeline systems. By the way, there's another problem with hydrogen. As I point out in Green Breakdown, there's some safety issues. The world tried to do hydrogen dirigibles for many years, from about 1906 to 1937. And that was when the Hindenburg blew up in New Jersey. They had hydrogen that was lighter than air inside these things. But the problem is when they leak, hydrogen ignites at a very low temperature. You can ignite hydrogen with static electricity. And by the way, the flames are invisible initially. So you also have issues with safety with hydrogen that are not simple. By the way, after 1937, they got rid of all those dirigibles.
Right.
If you read about the history, there were dozens of these explosions, dozens of people killed. Just not really a good thing. Not anywhere near as stable as our other fuels.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned this. Correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't that the Hindenburg accident due to the fact that we had an embargo on Hitler of helium, and that's why they had to use hydrogen, which is more flammable, obviously?
Yeah, I don't know about that. That's a good possibility.
And as you said, they were all over the world. That was the mode. You think of cruise ships right now? In the past, we had dirigibles, the Zeppelins. That's the way people used to travel before, by air.
They did for a while, yeah.
So going back to the mini ice age, the medieval warm period, all these climatists talk about, oh my God, it's going to be, warm weather that's going to kill us all. But as you said, the plagues, the agriculture, all that stops when it becomes ice. Why don't they talk about that?
Well, that's true. The warmer periods have always been better. The medieval warm period from about 1000 to 1300 AD is when they built the churches in Europe. And then we went into a period called the Little Ice Age from about 1300 to 1800. And it was a terrible time in Europe. The island of Iceland became ice-locked for a large part of the river. The oceans froze all the way around Iceland. The population of Iceland declined by about 50%. We had plagues in Europe. The population in Europe declined. Yeah, but so this is again another period when the cool temperatures are not so good for everyone. The warm temperatures are good, and we shouldn't be fearing a little bit of warming.
I want to get back to your book in a moment, but before we started, I mentioned something that's been bothering me for the past couple of months with this whole, the advent of AI. Oh, people love AI, and I think it's great in many ways. It's a double-edged sword. But when it comes to energy consumption, I read that the energy will be doubling the demand every single year. So if right now, 2025, we have it at 1%, by the year 2032, this will be 128%. This will be impossible, meaning collapse happens before this point, Steve.
Well, you're right. This is occurring, and there may be some problems with it, of course. So a little bit of history. ChatGPT released their artificial intelligence chatbot in November of 2020.
17 seasons of uncensored interviews. While you're hearing part 1 with ads, Veritas Plus members get part 2 immediately, plus video interviews and discounted transcripts. Become a Veritas Plus member today at veritas7.com.
And the world of artificial intelligence exploded. The ChatGPT showed that machines could learn the complexities of human language and interaction. And then now AI is producing text and images and music and video. And these require enormous amounts of electricity, as you mentioned. Now, at the start of 2024, we had about 2,700 data centers in the United States, according to a website called USA Data Centers. Now that's about 4,000 data centers within a year and a half. That's gone up 50%. And not only that, all these big firms, Amazon, Google, Meta, Microsoft, and Tesla, are upgrading these data centers. Data centers used to just run the internet and be there for cloud storage, but now they're there for artificial intelligence. Back in early 2024, about 4% of US electricity was in use in data centers. But now the projections are that that's going to rise to 20% within a decade. Just a huge, huge amount. And so we have and by the way, the utility power companies didn't see this coming. And now we have places like Texas saying they need to increase their generating capacity by 150% within the next decade. Virginia as well, many other places. So we have all these big guys, Amazon, Google, Meta, Microsoft, Tesla, building these data centers. And there's going to be a huge demand for electrical power.
Governor Newsom of California, a year or two ago, asking people to please, reduce, change your temperatures in your thermostats because we can't keep up. There's going to be blackouts. At the same time, pushing electric vehicles. But let me just get back to this. The numbers. By 2028, just 3 years away from now, AI will be pulling 8% of world electricity. That's already more than the entire country of India or Russia. 2029, 2030, 16 to 32%. That's catastrophic strain on grids and prices. 2031, impossible without human sacrifice. And by 2032, it's either silicon-based life forms or carbon-based life forms. One has to go, Steve.
Okay, so here's some of the things that are happening. One of the first things that's happening is that power plants are restarting or extending. We have nuclear plants that are being restarted. The Palisade plant in Michigan, one of the 3 Mile Island plants in West Pennsylvania. Iowa recently said they're going to restart a nuclear plant. Second, coal plants are being extended. These were all planned for shutdown in states like Tennessee and Utah and West Virginia. They are being extended now because there's not enough power around. But the big winner is natural gas. And by the way, the latest thing is BYOP, bring your own power. Rather than relying on the grid, these big firms are going to build their own gas-fired power plants. An example is Elon Musk's Tesla company. Now, Tesla is the leading provider of solar systems and grid-scale batteries. But Tesla just completed its Colossus XAI supercomputer facility in Memphis, Tennessee. And they didn't do it with solar and grid-scale batteries, and they didn't rely on the grid. they put in 35 on-site gas turbines to supply electricity for this. And Colossus was built in less than 6 months and expanded to 200,000 graphics processing units, and is claimed to be the most powerful AI training system yet, although other ones are being built as well. But this is going on around the country right now. Texas is another example. Texas is planning they're planning 108 new gas-fired power plants to be done within the next 3 to 5 years, and they're expanding 17 others. And most of these are on-site plants. By the way, Texas is the biggest wind state in the country, but when these new gas plants are finished, these new plants themselves are going to provide 3 times the electrical power of all the wind turbines in Texas. So this is what's happening. It's just an astonishing situation.
When I see all these windmills in California, when you're driving to San Diego from the south, or, in Texas, we're talking about thousands and thousands of them. Obviously, they're going to break down at one point. They can't be recycled, and they only survive because they're subsidized by the government. So if something is sustainable, why does it have to be subsidized?
Well, that's a big question. Yeah. As you know, the Trump administration and the big beautiful bill by Congress have just cut subsidies. We've been subsidizing wind since about 1992, and solar for many, many years also. And then if you go back just a year or two ago to the Biden bill, the Inflation Reduction Act, I guess I should go back even further. For about a decade, the federal government has been providing about $10 to $15 billion a year in subsidies for wind and solar. And these are in the form of investment tax credits, production tax credits, loans, and grants. But then when the Biden administration passed the Inflation Reduction Act, that number went up to $100 billion a year, according to the Cato Institute. Just a vast amount of money going to these renewables. But now the big beautiful bill has cut all of those investment tax credits. There are efforts you must start construction within a year or two. You must finish by 2028 to get the credits. And so, as you know, the people that say wind and solar are cheaper say, "Oh, how dare you cut all these tax benefits for for wind and solar?" But just a huge upheaval coming from the Trump administration on this.
Well, you mentioned hydrogen and the fact that it's the distribution. As you said, there are no pipelines for that natural gas we have. But there's one aspect that I've always wondered since you mentioned nuclear, because I always wondered, why don't we have more nuclear plants? And it's the uranium issue, right? But what about thorium? Thorium, we could use instead of uranium, thorium. It's really abundant on Earth. It's safer than uranium. It won't melt like Fukushima or Chernobyl. So why is it? Is it because it threatens the energy scarcity narrative, the artificial scarcity, the planned obsolescence?
Well, it's been the cost of nuclear plants. We have about 94 nuclear plants operating now, down from, I think we had 103 a few years ago. And they provide just about 20% of U.S. electricity. So they are still a good source. But the problem is so many regulations have been put on nuclear over the last 30 years that it's very, very hard to build one. I spoke at a plastic pipe group a couple of years ago, and the guy said, well, if we ship pipe to a regular factory, we need about 2 inches of paperwork. But if we ship it to a nuclear plant, we need about 1 inch of paperwork to get this thing done. I mean, there are all kinds of regulation issues. So nuclear right now has some cost and some delivery issues. It takes 5 or 10 years to put in a nuclear plant, and the cost is several times that for a gas plant. You can put in a gas plant in about 1 or 2 years. Now, I need to add, though, as you say, we have thorium, and we have a lot of people trying to build small modular reactors. There are about 50 around the world, 50 companies that are trying to do this. And Chris Wright, the head of the U.S. Department of Energy, is pushing this in a very big way. He wants a couple small modular reactors done within a year in the U.S. And so the government is pushing this. Again, this is a little bit of unproven technology, but it has high potential, I think. But they really need to get the cost down. But nuclear could be an answer to driving this. And by the way, we have some folks like Westinghouse Electric, which is talking about putting in 10 nuclear plants in Pennsylvania to support the artificial intelligence effort in Pennsylvania, which is really ramping up. So I think nuclear does have potential.
I just hope that people learn more about thorium, because when you talk to, I'm going to steal that word from you throughout the interview. When you talk to a climatist, and you tell them, why don't we use more nuclear with thorium? They immediately think, oh, radiation, Chernobyl, Fukushima, and it's all dire, but they don't think that this is truly sustainable. But you probably need water. Isn't this what's happening in California? Not because of nuclear power plants, but because of the data centers. All these farmers that are going on the news saying they cut our water, we have to shut down because they're rerouting the water supply to these data centers?
I don't know if it's data centers, because I think California's electricity is so high that most people are building data centers elsewhere. But you're right about thorium. The thorium reactors will automatically shut down, whereas the traditional heavy water reactors, if they lose their cooling system, they're at risk of having a meltdown. But the thorium reactors automatically shut down. I think one of the big issues with thorium is the abrasiveness is the wrong word. The reactivity of the thorium salt itself. They have to figure out how to handle that. But a lot of the new small reactors are thorium. I think California's got different issues. They had population expansion for many, many years. They did not upgrade their water systems to provide enough water, and so they have big shortages in California today. But I think a lot of places are avoiding California. California's electricity is about 32 cents a kilowatt hour. That's twice the national average. That's twice the price in nearby states, Oregon, Nevada, and Arizona. So if I'm a guy building a data center and electricity is a big cost, I'm going to go to Iowa or Indiana or Texas or Virginia rather than California.
Absolutely. And I've seen people coming on the news saying that they're paying more in electricity, more than their own mortgage. But I remember talking to the late Matt Stein. He wrote the book, When Disaster Strikes and Technology Fails. And we talk about this very subject. If for some reason there's an EMP, an electromagnetic pulse bomb, or a hack attack in our grid, and we go black, what's going to happen to all these power plants? Because they need water in order for them to stop if you have uranium, the backup, they're going to melt. What's going to happen environmentally then?
Yeah, that's a big issue, the EMP. I think the EMP can knock out a city's electricity. I don't think it can knock out the whole country. You'd have to use a lot of them. But that's an unknown thing. We don't really know what would happen. And our grid is not as strong as it used to be. We've had one of the side effects of wind and solar and intermittent power sources is states have put these on, and they have removed coal, and they don't have the margin they used to have. And as I think you know, in February of 2021, we had a big outage in Texas. Power was off to 4.5 million people for 72 hours, and more than 200 people died during that incident. And that's more than any hurricane in history except one. So we need to make sure that we have reliable baseload power. And by the way, Chris Wright, the Energy Secretary, is pushing that in a big way now. And the current Trump administration is really opposed to wind and solar, and he wants to build more traditional power plants and nuclear as well.
So you think the Green New Deal is dead?
Well, there's really big changes. One is from the administration. Mr. Trump in January issued executive orders. One of the things he did was he banned new leases for offshore wind. The EPA and other groups are now pushing back against offshore wind licenses. And then you have the big, beautiful bill that has cut all the tax credits. And then on the other side, you have the AI revolution. And these data centers, by the way, they can't run just during the daytime. They want to run 99% of the time. They want to run all night. Solar can't power them. They want to run when the wind isn't blowing. That's why all these guys are building gas power plants. I'll give you another example. Meta, Facebook, is claiming to build the biggest data center in the Western Hemisphere. This is in North Louisiana. And when this thing is completed in the next 5 years, they're estimating it's going to use twice the electricity as the entire city of New Orleans, if you can imagine. So how are they going to power this thing? They're in the process of building 3 big gas-fired power plants right on site. That's what they're doing. So this is occurring. I think AI is going to have some issues, and maybe there's some things that aren't good for society. But it is occurring right now. It's being pushed by the administration and by all these big companies.
What about hydro? I mean, when I think of oil platforms, right? Why can't we build a data center? And this might sound ridiculous, but on a platform in the ocean where you have all this water around you, the movement of water creates hydroelectricity.
I think China's actually doing that. I think they're actually trying to build a data center out on the ocean for cooling purposes.
Right.
Using it water cooled. But you still need an energy source. And I don't know that wave power really does much for you. That's wave is still very, very.
Loving this interview? We have 17 seasons of content just like this, plus part 2 of every episode, all ad-free for Veritas Plus members. Become a member today at veritas7.com.
Experimental. So I don't know how you get it out in the oceans. You'd have to build solar panels all over the place or something, and then batteries would be very, very expensive. I think the best thing we've got is natural gas to power data centers, and then if we can get the cost down for nuclear or modular nuclear, that's the other thing. That's very, very good.
I remember decades ago when a college professor told me in the future, war will be for water wars. We've even seen movies about that, but I think this is now what's going to happen, in my opinion. If all these data centers are going to require water, and we need water in order to survive, what's going to happen in the future? Are we going to create more desalination plants around the coast?
Yeah, I think they're going to have to recycle that water. They're going to have to keep using it. Now, some of the systems that cool data centers are evaporative right now. And so they use a lot of water and then it evaporates. So that's not necessarily good. I think they're going to have to put in systems instead where the water can be recycled and reused. And that'll be a big thing. And then the other thing about water, the global water consumption has increased 2 or 3 times over the last 50 years. And the United Nations says this is a big problem. We're running out of water. That's not really the case. What we need to do is do desalination in California. In Virginia Beach, where I live part-time in the year with my wife, they're building a big desalination plant there as well. Israel gets more than 50% of their water from desalination. They take the seawater and they take the salt out of it and they use the water. Now, when you do that, you still got to have someplace to put the salt. You got to deal with that. You just can't dump it back in the ocean. So there's issues with that method as well. But I think the future is, and by the way, the other thing that's of potential is reuse of wastewater and cleaning it up. Today, 80% of the world's water is discharged untreated into rivers, lakes, and streams. That's not happening in the U.S. We have good water cleanup, not happening in Europe. But if you remember, in Brazil, they had the Olympics about 7 or 8 years ago, and the swimmers didn't want to swim in the water in Brazil. They're just building their first desalination plants. So around the world, this is an area where we can really help the environment, have people build desalination, clean up, I should say water purification plants, clean up their wastewater, reuse it. And I think that's possibly what they'll be doing with data centers as well.
Well, data centers aren't only for AI. I even know one individual who bought a 10,000 square foot building, and I asked him, what are you doing with it? Oh, it's a data center for crypto mining. Mining too.
That's another thing. It's a little bit smaller. I'd say about 10% of what's going on with AI. But that's another area, crypto mining, where we're using a lot of electricity. And that's been noted by a number of people, like the Lieutenant Governor of Texas, who's complained about it as well as all the AI.
Well, also with quantum computers, they have to. I forgot the amount of the temperature, but they have to be so cold. Quantum computers, because the demand for energy is so high. Well,
that's another thing. That's all of these things. And by the way, Europe is we see what's going on in the United States. Well, the chairman of NVIDIA, Jensen Huang, just went to the Middle East and he went to Europe. And by the way, NVIDIA produces 80 or 90% of the graphics processing units that go into these data center servers. They're the real engine that does all this computing. And anyway, he went all around Europe, and England said, yeah, we want to do data centers in Germany and France. The problem is that Europe has been relying on wind and solar for many years. And the actual electricity consumption in in England has been declining for 2 decades now. So if Britain decides they want to do AI, they got to do an about face. There's no way they can keep declining their energy consumption. There's no way they can use wind and solar. They're going to have to do something else. So we're going to see this going on around the world.
Again, I'm not an expert, but I'm wondering, we have bases in Antarctica. There's Greenland that allegedly President Trump wants to unite with the United States. There's Iceland.
Yeah.
These cold places, why don't we have more data centers in these cold places?
A good question. I don't know. I know there are a lot of them in Ireland, by the way. Ireland has banned data centers. They have a whole bunch of them there, but they banned the new construction. I think President Trump wants to get Greenland for minerals such as rare earths, because he knows we have a weakness. We buy almost all of our rare earth minerals from China. And so he'd like to get a bunch of those from Greenland and build it out, but I don't know if that's going to work out.
So before we go to extreme weather claims, let me just end with this. If humanity flourished in the warmth and suffered in the cold, why is warming treated as catastrophe then?
Well, it's all part of this, as you say, these scare tactics for the people of man-made global warming and the climatists, and they're trying to say to everyone, warm weather is dangerous. That's not the case. When people start retiring to the cold climates, then I'll believe it, but that's not what we're seeing.
I don't know how many hurricanes. I grew up in the Caribbean. Several hurricanes there. Then I moved to Florida, and then in 1992, Hurricane Andrew. So I know what being in the center of a hurricane is. It's look at the insurance policies in Florida right now. But everybody said, oh, it's just due to climate change. So why is it? Is it propaganda that's multiplying every time there's a hurricane? They say it's climate change.
Well, I think it is. I'm sorry to say. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change of the United Nations has actually said that there's not a lot of data. I think they said it was, I can't remember exactly what their measure was, but they've never really said that there's issues with storms getting stronger or more frequent, even though the press takes this up and you hear it every single day. So you can go to the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration websites, and you can see that this fear about severe storms isn't true. I show a chart using NOAA data when I present to groups that has counted the number of hurricane landfalls in the United States, and this data goes all the way back to 1850. But back about 1900 and 1910, we were getting about 20 hurricanes that would make landfalls in the United States every decade, but that has been falling for the last 100 years. Now we're running below 15 hurricanes per decade of landfall on average, and this is data from NOAA. So the number of hurricanes making landfall has been declining. There's other data too. A meteorologist and scientist by the name of Ryan Maui publishes data. He's got a good website, and for the last 50 years, scientists like Maui have been using satellite data to track global tropical cyclones. And satellites actually can look down and measure the wind speed, and they do. They track every tropical cyclone on the surface of the Earth, all during its existence. They're able to measure the wind speed, and that produces 3 different graphs. The number of tropical storms, the number of stronger hurricanes, and then the number of major hurricanes. And we get about 90 tropical storms in any 12-month period on the surface of the Earth. But if you look at the data, you see that the number of tropical storms goes up and down, but it isn't rising. If you look at the number of hurricanes, we get about 45 in any 12-month period. Again, that goes up and down throughout this 50-year history, but that isn't rising either, and neither is the number of major hurricanes. So the data would show if storms were getting stronger, more tropical storms would exceed the wind speed to be labeled a hurricane, but it isn't happening. But you hear this over and over in the press and from the climatists that storms are getting stronger, but the data doesn't support the fear.
I remember a few years ago, I had some friends staying in Mazatlan. All of a sudden, there was this Category 5 hurricane approaching. They were saying, this is the record. This is the biggest hurricane. The winds are incredible, blah, blah, blah. And once the hurricane was going in, not because of the eye, but I called my friends, like, how are you guys doing? And they said, a little bit of rain. We don't even feel anything. So do you think that NOAA and the weather and entities behind the government are feeding us garbage sometimes?
Well, I am kind of concerned, but, they've been shaped by the presidential position. And under President Biden, for example, the U.S. military had to say they were going to stop global warming. They were going to use biofuels. They were even going to use electric tanks on the battlefield, all kinds
yes.
of things. Now Pete Hegseth has come in and said, we're not going to do that anymore. But I think NOAA is heavily influenced by what's going on with the administration. By the way, there are also monetary issues. Both NASA and NOAA, a big part of their budget is for climate work. NASA was spending about 50% of their budget on climate. And what the Trump administration is doing is they're saying, well, we're going to have NASA concentrate on
space.
Space. Wow, isn't that revolutionary? So they've been proposing a 50% cut to NASA's budget.
Did you say 50% of their budget was being used on climate?
Well, they're looking to cut 50% of their budget for fiscal year 2026. But NASA, for example, runs these big climate models, which are very expensive. You got to run them on a supercomputer, and you have a team, and it costs $20 million a year to run. Same with NOAA, same with the Department of Energy. And these cuts mean that there is not going to be enough money, these Trump administration cuts, to run these climate models. So, there's really some big things going on here with what the administration is doing.
When I see hurricanes, wildfires, floods, heat waves, now all of that is stamped with the climate label.
Yeah.
Somehow, even, I don't know if you probably know this, earthquakes, they're attributing earthquakes to the climate narrative. Isn't that the point where science crosses into superstition, Steve?
Yeah, I think that's really crazy, earthquakes. I think that's really a stretch. I'm trying to remember the international organization. I think it's called MDAT. MDAT is an organization that tracks disasters and deaths from disasters, and they've been doing it for more than 50 years. And if you look at the deaths due to disasters, including earthquakes, but storms and droughts and floods, you find that deaths have been declining. They're down about 98% since the early 1900s. So it doesn't really fit with the narrative that climate change is causing more deaths. Globally, the deaths are down. But if you look at things like droughts and floods in the United States, again, using NOAA data, NOAA publishes a thing called the Power Drought Index, and it shows the portion of the continental United States, the lower 48 states, that are in either a wet condition or a dry condition every year. And so I show this to audiences as well. And if you look at this graph, you see, well, we've had many years that are very wet, many years that are very dry. But there's no increase. There are no wet and no drought. We've had dozens of times in the past when droughts are worse than recent droughts. There's really no evidence that they're getting worse.
What do you say about what happened in North Carolina a few weeks ago, where all of a sudden in less than 45 minutes, we had the the water rise 10, 12 feet.
Yeah, we've had some. Well, I remember. I don't remember recently a flood. I missed that, I think. I do remember a hurricane last year that came in and hit Western Carolina. Was really
That's
terrible.
right. That one. Yep. No,
But,
actually,
you know,
no, I'm sorry. One was in Texas. The one you're referring to is the other one. It had
yeah. Texas was earlier in the summer. Really a terrible situation. About 200 people killed, and they had a situation where they were actually warned that there's possible problems with flood, but it came in the middle of the night. It rose so fast. My wife has said what they need is a horn warning system up on telephone poles, like we have in the Midwest for tornadoes. I think they're going to put something like that in. But a flood expert from the University of Texas has pointed out that this area is actually called Flash Flood Alley near Texas because they have so many floods there. And he also pointed out that Texas leads the nation in flood deaths by a wide margin. This guy's name was Hatim Sharif. They did a 50-year analysis or 60-year analysis of floods in the country, and they found that Texas had more than 1,000 people killed over 6 decades. The next highest state was Louisiana with about 700 people killed. So really a tragedy. It was warned about, but it's not something that's abnormal. They have these floods periodically, and it's certainly not caused by your neighbor's SUV. But they definitely need better warning systems down there in Texas Hill Country so that people have a chance to get away.
Going back to the North Carolina one with that hurricane that came to the east.
Yeah.
You probably knew this before. For months they were trying to tell people, hey, can you sell your property? And they would say, no, no, no. All of a sudden that happened. And that goes into the conspiratorial part that I'd like to discuss with you in part 2. But you know, they found huge reserves of lithium and quartz in that part of the world. And people can't rebuild anymore.
Yeah, well, that's interesting there. I actually went back after that flood in North Carolina and found that they had another one about 1918. That was the biggest in history. Very similar sort of flood. And so, you get these things. This is weather. This is not climate. The only sensible thing for us to do is to adapt to the climate, to the weather, not to try and change it. For example, like ocean rise, Netherlands for hundreds of years has been building seawalls. They've been building artificial islands as the oceans have been rising. If you want to stop deaths in the Caribbean from hurricanes, you need to build very strong concrete buildings. And in Africa, for example, people don't even have fans. 40% of the people don't have electricity. Many people don't even have an electric fan. The best thing we can do is boost their ability to enjoy electricity and help them adapt to hot temperatures. The idea that we can stop hot temperatures by changing our light bulbs or anything else, that's just modern superstition.
I forgot one, volcanoes. They're also rebranding volcanoes as climate disasters. But, what happened in 2020, and I'm not going to say the name because I get shut down every time I use that name. To me, that was practice. Because right now, what we hear is climate lockdowns to tell people just stay home, ration fuel, you can't leave your home, restrict your travel, banning meat. Do you think this is all part of the plan?
Well, there's a bunch of these things going on that we can talk about. So Fatih Birol, the executive director of the International Energy Agency, said a couple of years ago that if governments are serious about the climate crisis, there can be no new investments in oil, gas, and coal from this year. And so they think we can eliminate hydrocarbons. But again, if you look at the history, I have another graph that I put up that shows that the share of world energy from coal, oil, and gas is still about 81%, the same as it was in 1999. And this is after the world has spent about $5 trillion on renewables. It hasn't changed at all. We had U.S. climate envoy John Kerry call for a ban on all coal-fired power stations. And I'm kind of scratching my head. coal is the biggest source of world electricity. It provides 35% of world electricity. We have 6,500 coal-fired power plants operating in the world and another 1,000 in construction. And yet we still have 700 million people that don't have access to electricity. And as I talk about in Green Breakdown, we have another 2 billion people in the world that have electricity blackouts every day or every other day. And if you're in the United States and you run an air conditioner in the summer, that one appliance uses more electricity than a third of the world's people get to use every year. So Mr. Kerry saying that we got to ban all coal-fired power plants is sort of like saying, Marie Antoinette said, well, if the people don't have food, let them eat cake. It's just crazy.
But with coal, didn't cruise ships use that? The Titanic used it, and so many other, places. This was the workhorse of civilization, coal. Why did they take that away?
Well, coal does have some pollutants. The carbon dioxide isn't the problem. It's the sulfur dioxide, nitrous oxide, particulates, other sorts of things. And, there are many ugly pictures in history of coal plants belching out smoke, but you don't see those nowadays. We have put scrubbers on, we clean up those systems. So coal is much cleaner than it used to be, but like all energy sources, it contributed to pollution. By the way, what you see with nations over time, when nations are poor and they don't have food and healthcare and water and enough energy, they're not so concerned about what they put into their air and water. They just want to boost their income. And so nations go through a period where they're going to use coal and they're going to use other things. But then as their wealth rises, eventually they reach what is called a turning point income. And they look around, they say, gee, our air and water is lousy, but now we have the means to do something about it. And then as their income increases further, we see that the air gets cleaned up. It's like the Mexico City story with air pollution. And so the best way to reduce pollution is to boost the income of nations, not to restrict energy use. And so we now see many nations moving to natural gas and cleaning up their gas plants as well. By the way, this was the United States too. In the 1950s, my grandfather had a coal furnace in his basement, as many people did in Chicago. And when, after it snowed in the winter, within 4 or 5 days, you'd see a black film on top of all of the snow because of the coal people were burning and what was going to the air. And the young folks in your audience may not know what spring cleaning was for. In those days, literally every spring, people would wash down the inside all of their walls to remove the coal dust. But now we've gone to natural gas. And if you remove either wood burning or remove coal burning from a home and put in natural gas or propane, you reduce the particulates by a factor of 1,000. It's a big, big number. And that's what societies do as they get wealthier. So our air is very much cleaner, and that's a good thing. And some of these other nations will get there as well.
And that's interesting what you said about spring cleaning. I did not know that was the factor. But, one last thing before we take a break, thinking of the Titanic and other cruise ships at the time, they had hundreds of stokers working day and night, putting coal into the furnaces to keep those massive engines running. And all of a sudden we get progress. We have heavy fuel oil, natural gas fueling these cruise ships. And you think, okay, praise us. But now they're the villains. Oh, you're polluting the oceans. You're causing climate change. So every time there's progress, a group of people always comes along saying, no, you're doing it wrong. Don't they contradict themselves?
Yeah, again, the focus is wrong now. It used to be on particulates, sulfur dioxide, and other things that could cause real harm to people, but we've eliminated a lot of those. Now the focus is on carbon dioxide, which should not be called a pollutant. We each exhale about 2 pounds of carbon dioxide every single day. And a guy pointed out to me the other day that when people exhale, the 8 billion people, we exhale more carbon dioxide than the world shipping industry. But carbon dioxide makes the plants grow. It shouldn't be called a pollutant. and let's focus on real pollution, not CO2.
And that's exactly what I want to discuss when we come back. Carbon dioxide, the contradiction, because commercial farmers pay to pump more CO2 into greenhouses because it makes plants grow faster and healthier. Imagine that. The substance we're told is killing us is used to produce food. That contradiction alone should make people stand up and ask questions. But how can people buy the book, your other books, your websites, and so on, Steve?
Yeah, they can get Green Breakdown, The Coming Renewable Energy Failure. Another great book is The Mad, Mad, Mad World of Climatism. These are color paperbacks. They have a lot of charts, a lot of graphs, very good reading. And I have in them about 150 color sidebars that are real headlines about climate change. And a lot of them are wacky, like the New York Times article that said you should mate with short people to stop global warming. So anyway, they're a lot of fun. And they can get them from my website, Steve Goreham, GOREHAM.com. I'll send them a signed copy if they buy one there. But there are ebooks available on Amazon as well. And they can also get these where bookstores are sold. Books are sold, I should say.
It's a pleasure to have Steve Goreham here. One more hour to come. This is Mel, listening to Veritas. Don't go anywhere. Here's a track from Truth Frequency. You won't hear anywhere else. If you like what you hear, you can get the full track at veritas7.com on the page for today's guest.
We live in an age where questions are dangerous. To question climate dogma is to risk exile. Science was born of doubt, not obedience. So we ask,
fear has become faith.
Climatism, a belief without debate. Today's warming, called unprecedented. But history speaks of medieval warmth, of thriving civilizations. If warmth once fed us, why fear it now? The earth remembers what humans forget.
They blame every fire, every flood on carbon. But the data whispers a different story. CO2, the gas of life, now branded poison. Farmers pay to pump it into greenhouses. Is that a pollutant or a provider? They declare no more hydrocarbons, yet 80% of the world runs on them. From hospitals to homes to food, remove them and you suffocate civilization.
Coal powers light in Africa. To deny it is to deny modernity. Meat, stoves, energy, all targets now. This isn't climate policy. It's behavioral control, obedience, disguised as virtue. Wind and solar need mines, metals, and money. Free energy only with trillion-dollar subsidies. If they were truly sustainable, why do they collapse without force-fed funds?
This is not just about power, it's about who decides abundance or managed decline. Ask the question, they won't answer. The green breakdown has already begun.
Truth doesn't fear the light.
Thank you for listening to the first part of this important Veritas episode. To hear the rest and access all of our exclusive content, head over to the Veritas Plus member section or click the subscribe button at veritas7.com. While you're there, don't forget to visit the Veritas store, featuring a range of great products, including Focus Life Force Energy. Experience the benefits with a 15-day free trial of FLFE, no credit card required. Want to get in touch? Be a guest on the program? Suggest someone or share feedback? Just click the contact button at veritas7.com. Thank you for listening to Veritas, because you don't want to believe, you want to know.